Gunnery Sergeant Miller's sharp voice shattered the tense silence. "Is this some kind of joke?" he barked, his eyes not on his Marines but on the elderly man standing quietly behind the firing line. "Do you even know where you are, old man?" he demanded. The man, Dean Peters, 82 years old, stood calm and steady. He wore faded jeans and a worn-out work shirt, holding a long cloth-wrapped object in his weathered hands. His posture was relaxed, but his sharp eyes missed nothing. They followed, the fluttering flags across the range, each one telling its own story, a chaotic language of wind and motion that the Marines' advanced gear struggled to interpret. "This is a live fire training area for Force Recon snipers," Miller continued, striding toward him. Miller looked every bit the modern soldier, fit, confident, and outfitted in top-tier tactical gear. A ballistic computer, worth more than the old man's car, was strapped to his wrist. "Civilians aren't allowed here. You need to leave now." Dean's calm blue eyes met his. "The wind's tricky today," he said softly. "It's not one wind, it's three." Miller let out a short, skeptical laugh. A few Marines shifted uncomfortably. They'd been at this all morning, but despite their high-tech Kestrel meters and ballistic solvers, none could land a hit on the small steel silhouette 1,700 yards away. The readings kept conflicting, the calculations failing. The target, designed to simulate impossible real-world conditions, might as well have been on another planet. "3 winds, huh?" Miller scoffed. "Listen, Pops, I get it, you've got some old-school wisdom, but we've got equipment for that. We're tracking Coriolis effect, spin drift, barometric pressure. This isn't about guessing with a wet finger." Dean gave a small shrug. "That computer of yours can't sense the thermal updraft from those rocks 1,000 yards out. It doesn't feel the downdraft coming off the ravine to your left. And that flag near your target? It's lying. Looks like a left to right, but the valley's channeling the current the other way. You're solving one problem, but your bullet's flying through 3. One of the younger Marines, Lance Corporal Evans, lowered his spotting scope. He'd been watching the distorted air shimmer all morning. What the old man said actually made sense. The heat waves were flowing in different directions depending on distance. Still, he said nothing. Not in front of Gunny Miller. Miller's jaw tightened. His pride stung. This old groundskeeper, someone he'd seen mowing near the barracks, was lecturing him on marksmanship? "I suppose you could do better," Miller snapped. His tone dripped with sarcasm. He nodded toward the cloth bundle in Dean's hands. "What have you got there, Grandpa? Your squirrel rifle?" Dean didn't answer. Calmly, he unwrapped the object. It wasn't a modern sniper rifle, no carbon fiber, no adjustable chassis, no digital readouts. Just wood and steel. The walnut stock was darkened with age, scratched and dented from years of use. A simple scope sat on top, free of the complex turrets that modern optics boasted. It was an M40.A rifle from another era, a legend from the Vietnam War. The Marines stared. They'd only seen one in photos or behind glass in museums. Miller chuckled, shaking his head. "You're kidding, right? You think that antique can even reach the target, let alone hit it? The barrel's probably worn smooth." He pointed at a deep gouge in the wooden stock. "That thing belongs in a museum. You're going to hurt yourself." But as Miller's finger pointed, the hot desert air seemed to fade from Dean's mind. The range dissolved. The world around him turned humid and green once more. He wasn't 82 anymore. The air wasn't dusty. It was heavy with the choking humidity of a Vietnamese jungle. Mud and rot filled his lungs. A steady, warm drizzle plastered his uniform to his skin. He lay on his belly in a bed of ferns, perfectly still, his heart a slow, steady drum against his ribs. He held the same rifle, its walnut stock slick with rain and mud. The gouge Miller had mocked was fresh, a shard of shrapnel from a mortar that had landed too close minutes earlier. Through the simple scope, he watched a small clearing half a mile away. An enemy machine gunner was setting up, a position that could pin down an entire platoon. His breathing was the only thing he could control. He exhaled halfway and held as the crosshairs steadied. The wind, even here, lied. It swirled through the triple canopy. He didn't need a wind flag. He read the rain's angle, the tremble of a single leaf. He squeezed the trigger. The memory closed on the soft thud of the suppressed shot. a sound the jungle swallowed. Back on the range, the sun beat down. Dean's eyes returned to Gunnery Sergeant Miller. The old man's face had not changed, but something about his presence had. It had become heavier. He'd heard the mockery, but it hadn't landed. The rifle wasn't a museum piece. It was part of him. Lance Corporal Evans watched the exchange, unease knotting in his stomach. He was a good Marine who respected the chain of command, but he also respected his elders. And Miller's blatant disrespect felt wrong. There was more. A flicker of recognition at the back of his mind. He'd seen the old man around the base for years, always quiet, always to himself. He'd also heard the old salts at the armory whisper stories about a quiet groundskeeper who used to be somebody. Miller doubled down on his actions. His own failure on the range had curdled into anger, and Dean was the perfect target. "I am not going to ask you again, sir. This is a restricted area. You are a civilian and you are creating a safety hazard. Put that weapon down and step away from the firing line." Evans knew he had to act. He couldn't confront the gunny directly, but he could call for backup. "Gunny," he said, standing. "My spotting scope's reticle is swimming. I think the nitrogen seal popped from the heat. Permission to take it to the repair shop at the armory." Miller, distracted and annoyed, waved him off. "Whatever. Just get it fixed. We're not packing up until we hit this target." Evans grabbed his scope and jogged away from the firing line, heart pounding. He didn't go to the armory. He ducked behind a row of Humvees, pulled out his phone and dialed the number he needed. The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Armory, Master Gunnery Sergeant Phillips speaking." "Master Guns, it's Lance Corporal Evans from Charlie Company." "Evans, what can I do for you?" "Don't tell me you broke another $30,000 scope." "No. Master Guns, I'm out at Whiskey Jack Range with Gunny Miller's team." Evans lowered his voice and glanced back toward the firing line. "You won't believe this. Gunny Miller's tearing into that old groundskeeper, the quiet one." There was a pause on the other end. "The old man with the limp?" Phillips asked. "That's him." Evans continued, "But Master Guns, he brought an M40, and the gunny's about to have him arrested for trespassing." Evans hesitated, then named him, Dean Peters. Silence filled the line for 5 seconds. When Master Gunnery Sergeant Phillips spoke again, his tone had changed completely. Tight, urgent, stripped of its earlier gruffness.
"Son, are you telling me Dean Peters is on that range right now?"
"Yes, Master Guns." "Stay right there, Evans. Do not, under any circumstances, let Gunny..." Miller placed a hand on him. "Do whatever you have to do. I'm making a call. Just keep them there." The line went dead. Evans stood behind the Humvee, an uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. It felt as though he had just pulled the pin on a grenade. Colonel Marcus Hayes, commanding officer of the Marine Raider Training Center, was in the middle of a tense budget meeting, one that made him long for the clarity of a firefight. His aide, a young captain, burst in without knocking, his face pale. "Sir, sorry to interrupt, but there's a priority call on your direct line from Master Gunnery Sergeant Phillips at the main armory. He said to tell you it's a Whiskey Jack protocol." Colonel Hayes frowned. There was no such thing as a Whiskey Jack protocol, but he knew Phillips well. The man had forgotten more about the Marine Corps than most officers would ever learn, and he never exaggerated. Hayes picked up the phone. "This is Hayes." As he listened, his posture stiffened, knuckles whitening around the receiver. His tone was short, sharp, and growing more intense by the second. "What? At Whiskey Jack Range? With Gunny Miller's team? Who is there? Say that name again." There was a long pause. The colonel's eyes widened, shock washing over his face. "Are you absolutely certain?" He listened a moment longer before slamming the phone down, the sound echoing through the room. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping across the floor. "Captain," he barked, voice low but commanding, "get my vehicle now. Tell the base sergeant major to meet me at the front entrance in 2 minutes. We're going to Whiskey Jack Range, lights and sirens." At the range, Gunnery Sergeant Miller was losing his patience. The old man's calm refusal to be intimidated was far more frustrating than any argument. "That's it. I'm done with this circus," Miller snapped, stepping closer to Dean and invading his space. "Sir, I'm giving you a direct order to vacate this military installation. If you refuse, I'll have you detained and escorted off by MPs." To drive the point home, Miller placed a firm hand on Dean's shoulder, ready to guide him away. You're interfering with a live fire exercise and putting my Marines at risk. We're finished here. Dean didn't react. He didn't even flinch. He just looked down at Miller's hand, then up into his eyes. What Miller saw there wasn't fear or anger, but a deep, weary sadness. Then a distant siren pierced the air. Everyone froze. The sound grew louder, alien in the quiet expanse of the range. Heads turned toward the dirt road leading from the base. A plume of dust was rising, and fast. It wasn't one vehicle. It was a convoy. 2 black command Humvees followed by a military police cruiser. Lights flashing in the midday sun as they tore up the road. The convoy screeched to a stop near the firing line, doors flying open before the engines cut. The first man out was Colonel Hayes, his uniform spotless, his face cold with fury. The base sergeant major followed close behind, a towering figure of authority. Silence blanketed the range. Every sniper who'd been watching snapped to attention. Miller froze, his hand still resting on Dean's shoulder. Confusion and then horror spread across his face. In 15 years, he had never seen the base commander and sergeant major arrive anywhere, let alone a training range with such urgency. Colonel Hayes didn't even glance at him. His focus was locked on Dean. He strode forward, boots crunching on gravel, stopping directly before the old man. His gaze dropped to Miller's hand and his eyes narrowed. Miller quickly pulled his hand away as if burned. Then, the unimaginable happened. Colonel Hayes, commanding officer of one of the Marine Corps' most elite training facilities, snapped into the sharpest, most precise salute Miller had ever seen. His back was straight, arm locked, every inch of him radiating respect. "Mr. Peters," the colonel's voice carried across the silent range. "Sir, I apologize for the conduct of my Marines. There is no excuse for the disrespect you've been shown today." A collective gasp rippled through the young snipers. Miller stood motionless, his expression blank with disbelief. In less than a minute, he had gone from commanding the scene to being the subject of the colonel's outrage. The sergeant major stepped beside him, his tone low and dangerous. "Gunnery Sergeant, what in God's name were you thinking?" Colonel Hayes held his salute until Dean gave a slow, weary nod. Only then did he lower his arm. He turned to face the stunned Marines, his voice cutting through the air like steel. "Marines," he began, "you've been failing this test all morning because you think the technology on your rifles makes you marksmen. You've been humbled by distance, and instead of learning, your leader chose to direct his frustration at a man whose boots he's not fit to polish." He gestured toward Dean. "For your education, let me introduce you to the man you've been disrespecting. This is Chief. He quite literally authored the doctrine on high angle and extreme crosswind shooting, the very principles many of you are overlooking today. Back in Vietnam, U.S. forces didn't have names for enemy snipers, but the enemy had a name for him. They called him the Ghost of the A Shau Valley." Colonel Hayes' gaze swept over the young Marines, faces now frozen in awe. "Mr. Peters," he continued, "holds the 3rd longest confirmed kill in Marine Corps history. A shot taken during a monsoon in winds that would make today feel like a breeze. And he made that shot?" The colonel paused, letting the words settle. "With the very rifle your gunnery sergeant just called a museum piece." He turned back toward Dean. "Mr. Peters, sir, would you do us the honor of showing these men how it's done?" Dean nodded. He walked to the firing line, not with the brisk energy of youth, but with slow, deliberate precision. He lay down on the mat, positioning himself behind the old M40. No bipod, just his weathered rucksack supporting the forend. He breathed deeply, scanning the full length of the range. "Your computers are searching for data," he began, his voice calm but instructive. "You need to search for signs. See that shimmer over the rocks at 1,000 yards? That's a thermal drift moving right to left. But look at the grass on that berm at 1,500. It's barely swaying and leaning toward us. The wind's rolling back there. The flag at the target. It's catching the main current, a distraction. You have to find the window where the wind aligns." He made a few quiet, confident adjustments to his scope, each click guided by decades of instinct. Then he rested his cheek against the worn stock, took a deep breath, exhaled halfway, and the entire range fell silent. The sharp crack of the old M40 echoed through the air, a sound from another era. Spotting scopes locked onto the distant target. 2.5 long seconds passed. Then came a faint, unmistakable clang, the clean ring of a bullet striking steel dead center. Applause broke out. Cheers followed. The tension of the morning dissolved into respect and admiration. Colonel Hayes allowed himself a brief smile before turning coldly toward Gunnery Sergeant Miller. "Gunnery Sergeant," he said, voice low but cutting. "Your arrogance blinded you. Your duty isn't just to be a good sniper, it's to create more of them. You had a living legend offering you his knowledge, and you treated him like a trespasser. You have failed." Miller stood rigid. "Sir, no excuse, sir." "There is no excuse," the colonel confirmed. "You and your team will undergo 1 week of remedial training in wind estimation and fieldcraft, under Mr. Peters if he agrees." Dean rose slowly, joints protesting. He approached Miller, who couldn't meet his eyes. Gently, Dean placed a hand on his shoulder, the same one Miller had grabbed in anger earlier. "The gear helps," Dean said softly. "But it doesn't replace what's up here." He tapped his temple. "The wind doesn't care about your computer, it just is. You've got to listen to it, not measure it." As he held the rifle, a memory flickered. He was once a young corporal, handed this same weapon by a grizzled master sergeant from the Chosin Reservoir campaign. Back then, the rifle was newer, its metal darker. "She's not fancy," the old sergeant had told him. "She's heavy and she'll punish you if you don't respect her. But she'll never lie. The wind, the heat, the jungle, they'll deceive you. Learn her language and she'll tell you the truth." The rifle was never just a tool. It was a legacy, a bond passed from one generation of marksmen to the next. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere at Whiskey Jack Range changed completely. Each morning, elite Marine snipers, including a humbled Gunnery Sergeant Miller, sat in a semicircle around Dean Peters. No high-tech rifles, just open minds. Dean held up a simple blade of grass, teaching how its flutter could reveal more than any expensive weather device. He explained how to read mirage not as interference, but as a map of the wind. He reintroduced patience, observation, and instinct, skills dulled by over-reliance on technology. Soon, the Marine Corps officially added a new section to its sniper program, the Peters Wind Doctrine. A month later, on a quiet Saturday, Miller, now off duty, was in a hardware store buying sprinkler parts. In the next aisle, he spotted Dean studying packets of tomato seeds. "Mr. Peters," Miller greeted softly. Dean looked up with a warm, knowing smile. "Gunny, how are those tomatoes of yours coming along?" Miller blinked, surprised. "Sir? Saw you planting last week." "You put them too close together, they'll crowd each other out," Dean said with a wink. Miller felt a rush of humility, this time without shame. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you. I learned more from you in 1 week than in 5 years of training." Dean nodded, smiling genuinely. "You're a good Marine, son. You were just trying to read the book instead of the weather." He held up the seed packet. "It's all about the small things. Just keep listening, son. Always keep listening." Miller watched him walk away, a quiet old man who reminded an entire generation that the greatest weapon isn't the rifle in your hands, but the wisdom in your mind. If Dean Peters' story inspired you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Veteran Valor for more stories of America's quiet heroes.